Welcome to the Sip and Scale podcast, where we talk about everything business, entrepreneurship, and startups. My name is Blendi Muriqi. I'm the CEO and founder of delegate.co. Each week, you'll join us as we talk with industry experts and business owners, sharing actionable insights to drive your business forward. So grab your favorite beverage and let's sip our way to success. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Sip and Scale podcast. Today I have a special guest, a friend of mine, someone that is a veteran in the SDR space, Ben Coleman, the CEO and founder of Rethink Research and the co-founder of Happy Guest. Today we're going to be discussing his roots in the SDR space, how he ended up founding Rethink Research, as well as what he's doing today with Happy Guest and how it's really revolutionizing the guest experience for STR operators. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Blendi, thank you, man. We've known each other probably going on like 5 years now, I think.
Yeah. Started out at the conferences.
Yeah, I think we met in Austin at Guest Eval that year.
Yes, we did. And over the years, we've become good friends, and we continue to see each other at all the conferences. And now we're also working together, and we have a shared interest in optimizing companies through the use of overseas talent. It's been a cornerstone of both of our companies' growth. So I'm really happy to delve into that today, and as well as for people to learn more about Happy Guest and Rethink Research.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, excited to share with the audience. Hopefully some tips, some tricks. We've got some good stories I'm sure we'll come up with throughout the time. But yeah, like I said, virtual assistants, offshore employees have been a cornerstone of both my businesses, especially at Rethink Research from the get-go.
Yeah, definitely. Well, before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about your roots. You have a really interesting story of how you ended up in the STR space. I know a lot of people, they usually have this origin story that it's like they didn't intentionally get into the space. They kind of just fell into it. So I'd love to hear how you got in. It has, for a spoiler, it has something to do with bars, margaritas, and STRs in Mexico, right?
It does, yeah. I sold a business when I was young, got bored not working, and so decided that I would move down to this little island called Isla Mujeres, right off the coast of Cancun in Mexico when I was about 24. Beautiful piece of land down there, beautiful island. When I was down there, it was just a small fishing village where the golf carts outnumbered the taxis by 2-1. Very quaint, very quirky. Yeah, and had a few too many margaritas one night and bought a bar. Decided that I needed something to do. Part of that agreement was having the current owner leave the island. I had been working with him a little bit here and there, just trying to help him optimize his business, help him grow, help him kind of drive sales. And a lot of the problem was he was just not meant to be in the hospitality space. I think that's one thing is you don't just pick the vacation rental space. It kind of picks you, but you do have to have hospitality in your blood. And some people just don't have it, and he didn't have it. And so he was happy. He was probably happier than I was to get out of the business. And so I just remember I was in low season. And back then, that would have probably been June or July. It was hotter than hell down there. And we would keep the bar open really just to keep our employees working we had kind of figured out that keeping our core employees during low season was worth the loss or the break-even numbers of then trying to have to hire and retrain every year. And my best friend on the island was a guy named Sean. He was walking down the street and I saw him, and I had a bad problem when I owned a bar of letting my buddies run outrageously large tabs and, let them sit out there for months on end, which I don't recommend if you're in the bar and restaurant business. It's not a way to be profitable, which we found out. And I remember walking, I had just grocery sacks full of limes and lime juice and pineapple juice and just sweating. And I remember seeing Sean with a little pep in his step telling me that he had made $1,000 today and that he was going to come pay me his tab. And I just remember responding to him that 1,000 pesos wasn't $1,000. And he said, no, man, I made $1,000 today. And I just remember thinking in my head, what the hell is he doing to make $1,000 on this island?
Selling drugs on the island?
I mean, I'm like, I'm like, at this point, I just want my 400 because he owed me about $400. And it turns out what he was doing was his mom had 3 condos in this beachfront condominium. It's called E-Shell. It was right on North Beach, premium inventory. And his mom was letting him rent those out. So what he was doing was going on to Facebook groups looking for and basically just responding to people that needed accommodations. And just to age myself a little bit more, Airbnb had not made it down to Mexico yet. Verbo was still where you could buy your placement, where they would sell like their platinum tiles and they would sell their first page placement at a subscription fee. And so I started talking to him about what he was doing. One of the even funnier parts of that story is I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, and my grandparents have had real estate and condos down in Destin, Florida my whole life. And so we all know that Destin is the vacation rental capital of the world. And I grew up going all around this mecca of the vacation rental world and not having an idea that this was going on around me. Yeah. It took me moving to another country, to a faraway island, planes, trains, and automobiles to get there, to realize that this was a business. And it took us probably a couple months of us just talking to realize that other people were going to let him do this. I thought his mom was just throwing him a bone to take some work off her plate. I had no clue that there were actually vacation rental companies out there. And so really what happened after that was just being my best friend. We would hang out and he was somehow like not really making any money. And he's working hard. And it turns out that he just had no clue about cash flow. He had no clue about accounting. And, back then, neither would I when it comes to vacation rental accounting, which is a different animal. But what was happening to him was he was paying the payment processing fee and the VRBO commission and only taking 15%. So he all of a sudden was making about 3.5% per reservation.
Crazy.
And so I started talking to him about different ways to optimize that, different ways of what is he doing taking this, what is he doing not accounting that into his pricing, what is he not doing not accounting that to the owners. And then what happened to us is he was a real go-getter. He had talked himself into a contract with that E-Shell condominium to get into the owner's pool. And so he went from 3 vacation rentals to about 75 overnight.
Oh my God.
And the great thing about E-Shell was they charged you a cleaning fee. And so they took care of all the operations. So really all he had to do was build out VRBO listings, build out a marketing department. And that came with its own nightmares. And that was a true story of where he was in way over his head. He had no real business sense at the time, he's really grown. He's still running that operation down there. And all of a sudden he needed help. And all of a sudden I kind of came in and brought some ideas to the table that wouldn't be allowed now. But we were making duplicate listings. We were clustering listings together, moving guests around. And all of a sudden, E-Shell kind of found out what we were doing and how much money we were making. And we were getting complaints about, hey, we booked this unit. We didn't book that unit. And we're over there saying, hey, look in the listing description. It says that you may not get the listing described here, but you'll get a comparable one. Yeah. And so what ended up happening about 3 or 4 months after that is we kind of got kicked out of the owner's pool.
Nice.
Which ended up being a blessing in disguise for us, because what had happened was we really did a good job in our branding and Facebook groups. We had started to become the boots on the ground of where when you made a reservation, you knew you could get somebody on the phone. Me owning that bar down there gave a physical location for somebody to come and complain to, which, going from random listings of somebody hosting one in Minnesota or somebody hosting one in California. If something goes wrong, there was no community of short-term rentals there yet of where there could be, you could replace somebody or relocate somebody.
And you had an infrastructure.
We had that infrastructure built out. And so what we did is we started off with non-exclusive contracts saying, hey, we've got the first direct booking website on the island. We've also got a great reputation on Facebook. We've got a great marketing department. We were using not necessarily offshore talent, but local talent down there in Mexico to respond to Facebook messages. We had built out great SOPs for what to respond, how to look at what the guest was looking at. And we had built out like a matrix of, hey, if a guest is asking for Centro down with a pool, here are your 14 options. If somebody's asking for the South Point with a view, here are your 26 options. And so we really scaled up quickly that way. And we really became a marketing channel to fill empty calendars. And that became really strategic for us as we grew, because also what we would do is we would build out our own VRBO listings to tag team along their listings. So we had our channel, they had their channel, and then we had our direct booking site. And we really got to about 50 units really quickly. We were running that on a program we had built in Excel. We didn't know about software yet. I remember when we found our first piece of software, and that really took our double booking percentage from maybe like 7 or 8% down to 0, which was a huge lift. And so I got into the business that way. And I had been in corporate America. I had run my own business. So I had been in sales meetings and meetings and meetings. And I decided that, and I don't really know how I came up with this. It was probably more tagged along the fact that when you used to make small listing changes, regroup pictures, or, you would really see an increase in your OTA bookings. Like Verbo would pop you up that rankings chart automatically.
Back when the algorithm was a lot more simple.
It was. And it was almost like, hey, how quick did you respond to messages? And it wasn't even if you had good content. It wasn't even like if you had good content in there. It was more if you just had content. Yeah. Did you have 12 pictures? Did you have your amenities filled out? And coming from a marketing company, coming from something like that, we had that pretty dialed in. And I just remember telling my buddy, hey, you go out and grow us horizontal. You're going to be responsible for increasing our inventory. And at that point, that was really both of our jobs. And he kind of looked at me, he's like, what is your job going to be? I said, my job's going to be to increase us vertically. I want to boost our revenue on what we already have. Because if we can do that, we can become the vacation rental company on the island that is for return on investment.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And we really branded ourselves that way. And I remember our big kind of VRBO hack was we were changing pricing every 24 hours. Manually, just like Wheelhouse would do today. We weren't doing it dynamically by any means. And at that point, I hadn't even started like building comp sets or looking at what other people were charging. I just noticed that when we changed the price by a few bucks, that we got a booking for that listing the next day. And so that really led me into a journey of revenue management.
So very, very much kind of the opposite of, there are people that are in the space that would say, oh, like I have a data science background and I studied this and that. That was not the case for you. It was more so like you started in the weeds, actually operating these properties, and you learned from the market itself and from analyzing the algorithms of these OTA sites that changing the pricing has, a huge upside.
Absolutely. And if you think about it too, we weren't exclusive contracts yet. We hadn't even gotten to that point in the business yet. So really what it was doing was outperforming everybody else's listing on the channels.
Yeah.
I wasn't there with trying to maximize RevPAR. Yeah. That wasn't even on my radar yet. And it took a little while to get there. And then all of a sudden I remember his mom taking his mom. She ended up by that point having 6 units across the island. And I just remember saying, I don't think we're charging enough. I don't think that her units, the way they were decorated, they were luxury. They were the upscale of the upscale. They were finding pieces of arts from all over Mexico. And all of a sudden something clicked to me of like, why can't we charge maybe a little bit more for this luxury branding? And when we looked at it, what the market was doing was nothing was over or underpriced by more than like maybe 5 to 10%. And so I took those 6 listings about 3 to 4 months before high season and raised our pricing. And of course, raised it too high to start with and realized that all of a sudden I'm looking at cash flow and we don't have the bookings on these 6 units that we need to have. And so we started lowering pricing until we found that sweet spot, which I call chasing the curve now, where you kind of get behind the 8 ball of pace and you don't know what the market's dictating, where you've really got to start throwing rates up against the wall and see what the guests will buy.
Yeah.
And through that process started evolving my methodology in revenue management, which I look at things a little bit differently. I don't necessarily segment portfolios by bedroom count. I like looking at when units have historically booked. And when you look at it that way, all of a sudden you can start picking out trends a lot earlier, because if these apples, they stayed ripe until this point, you can start telling if 3 or 4 of your apples start spoiling early. You can start telling trends about how guest behavior is happening, how historical trends are changing, and what you can look at. And that just evolved over time to the point where our office just became an Excel spreadsheet laminated on the wall.
That's crazy.
It was wild, man. With all of our units listed out, grouped by where they were on the island. And we had these 2 retired teachers who would walk the island at like 6 a.m. every morning. And I had taught them what a booking summary report was. And so they would come into our office, they would print out the booking summary report, and then they would get to highlighting. And they would highlight in different colors what had booked that day, what had booked 3 days later, what had booked 7 days later. And so then what we did is we still didn't have any software. So we would have Tuesday and Thursday meetings to where I would go buy some booze and I would stand up on my desk like a New York Stock Exchange and just start yelling out our codes and start yelling out pricing. Wow. And we would move everything by percentages. And so we were just looking at, all right, hey, this group is not booking where it should. Let's lower pricing now. And then we would take a look back over what we had changed on Tuesday and the Thursday before to see what had booked too much. Because we realized real quickly that if time's on your side, you can do a lot more.
Yeah, I know that personally speaking. Lead time is absolutely everything. And as soon as you get the lead time wrong and changes are not being made within that curve, there's not much you can do.
It's a slippery slope. If you think about it just like a bell curve, once you get to that 50th percentile, it goes down a lot faster than it went up. And when you start sliding down that scale, all of a sudden, all you're doing is just bleeding out of your bottom line revenue. And then all of a sudden, if you want to start talking about homeowner retention, which becomes the true goal of revenue management, and that was our true goal, was I realized real early on that booked nights and the amount of bookable nights that I could have year over year would totally dictate our year. Because if we hadn't added on booked nights year over year, we were in trouble.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, you don't have your inventory to sell.
The other thing is, I mean, it's from an owner retention standpoint, the longer you can hold an owner, the more data you have. And the more data you have, the more you can support a hypothesis that we can keep prices the way they are for another month or another few weeks.
100%. And like I tell our pricing clients at Rev and Research that this is a year experiment.
Yeah. They're not going to get the ROI, like many things like marketing, revenue management's the same way, where if you don't have the historicals, you're kind of going in blind.
You are. And that's the thing, is you really kind of run into, are the historicals that you have when a new client comes into Rev and Research, are those what you want to repeat? Yeah. And a lot of times the answer is no. And when that answer is no, then all of a sudden, okay, we've got to chase the curve a little bit and see where your weaknesses were. And a lot of weaknesses stem to listening to homeowner pricing recommendations too much, not aggressive enough last minute discounts. Yeah. Because we like to set our last minute discounts based on that lead time. Yeah. Because if you're not optimized by that lead time, we want to start a little stair step of decreasing of prices, because at that point, you're just begging to hold on to what you have. And it's like you're just going down an elevator. We all kind of start off at the same place up in here. The question is, how much revenue can you sell at each floor?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
you don't want to have a lot. You don't want to have a lot to sell after you get to that 50th percentile mark. And when we get
100%.
into that 50th percentile, especially for high season, when your ADR is the most at risk, you really want to start driving that revenue in the front door. And it gets very complicated. It gets very tough for owners to understand why they had 3, 4, 6, 8 different ADRs that kind of vast from different ranges in the same season. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that, hey, you know what? This week, these 3 weeks of high season had high demand where these didn't. Well, hey, I thought it was all high season in the same demand. Well, no,
No,
that's not how it
it's
works.
week to week.
It is a week to week. It's a week to week drop in demand or increase in demand. And our job is to capture that demand when it's high, at its high. But really, the most important and critical part of that job is to kind of stop the bleeding when demand's not there in a high season. And
Right.
when you can start with a client with that foundation, what ends up happening in our business through our meetings and through hanging around my team is the confidence that comes from our clients to be able to explain revenue management to homeowners goes from around a 0 to 5%. And they get up into that high school, college level vocabulary, able to understand, able to stand confidently in front of a homeowner and speak to a revenue management strategy.
Yeah.
And if you can't speak revenue management strategy to homeowners, you're behind the 8 ball these days. I've seen that become more and more important as we've seen real estate transactions go from, hey, it was somebody's second home that the kids were using during spring break. Somebody was going down during July 4th. Another summer week was taken for their friends. And it was really, hey, rent it when it's open. But hey, the most important thing is to protect the asset
Yeah.
and to downsize maintenance costs. That is not the homeowner profile anymore.
It's an investment vehicle. It's become an investment vehicle, especially for larger property management companies. People are buying these properties for the sole focus of making a return on investment on it. It's definitely changed. But
And also too with the tools that we have out there, like if you just take AirDNA for example, they have such a reach with that investor crowd who's looking at it. You don't think they're looking at their AirDNA. You don't think they're looking at what their friends are doing. They're looking at Airbnb. They're looking at what's open, where it's a newer phenomenon for us to have to deal with. And what it comes down to, and which is why one of the reasons that I invested and it's so high on Happy Guest, is you've got to figure out ways to drive revenue after the booking if ADRs are going down.
yeah, 100%. I can tell you as a Happy Guest user, in the midst of a period of time where revenues are down 15 to 20% over the last, like, I would say 3 years, it's more important than ever to find new mediums of revenue generation. And I always say this, the best way to generate more revenue is through your captive audience. And you have a captive audience when someone comes and stays in your property. So, like, why not upsell products and services while there? Why not, dig deep into upselling early check-ins and late checkouts? And it's especially important for larger operators because everything at scale, there's scales of economy. If you're able to upsell X, Y, and Z product or service, it adds thousands of dollars to your revenue on a monthly basis.
No, it absolutely does. And then for a property manager, that's what I call bottom line revenue. That's revenue that you don't have to share out with the homeowner. And all of a sudden, you can start taking that money and reinvesting it back into the business. Like you said, I think that our industry is so far behind the times of taking that captive audience and monetizing it.
Yeah. Yeah. In a way, I always say that, like, the OTAs have been almost a crutch for the industry because it's allowed the demand to come to a centralized location where property managers don't really have to work hard because the bookings come anyway. But that only works for so long in markets where it's not saturated or there is high demand. In periods of time where demand is down, reliance on these OTAs, it can really bite you in the butt.
It really, really can. And there's definitely a place for OTAs. There definitely is, but it should be more of filling up your calendar than it should be the basis and foundation of your calendar.
Yes,
Uh,
100%.
and I talk to property managers all the time that also, too, it should be a profitability vehicle because you should be, especially from a property management standpoint, you should be marking that channel up more than the commission that it's charging you. So if a guest is going to book through the safety of an OTA, they need to be paying for that safety. They need to be paying for that ease of mind.
Yeah.
We need to drive revenue that way to where those channel markups get funky, but they are bottom line revenue.
Yeah.
And so, I've got clients now that are so direct booking focused that now they're actually working on more OTA bookings because they're more profitable. Because
Right.
they're making an extra 2 to 4% more money off an OTA booking than they are off a direct booking.
Yeah, again, that at scale, if you have a property management company with 500 properties, man, that 3% is a lot of money.
3% is a ton of money. And you can be talking, you can be talking at 3%, the difference of buying a second home or going on a third vacation versus scraping around.
Yeah.
Because, that was the coolest thing about owning a bar before I got into property management is you realize how thin margins can be and you can still be profitable.
Yeah. Well, let me kind of switch topics here, kind of same theme, talking about the revenue management. So obviously you had experience working for this company down in Mexico, getting your feet wet with revenue management. At some point you said, wait, why don't I do this for other people? Is that how Reven Research came about? Or you just
Yeah,
had other people come to you and say, hey, you've done this down in Mexico, can you do it for me?
no, absolutely. It came from that, not necessarily people coming to me. I had gotten our property management business and we had gotten our property management business to where it was really automated. It was really running itself. And I had gotten to the place of where I really wanted a new challenge. And I really wanted to dive my head into revenue management consulting, which really wasn't a thing. Now you kind of hear about everybody and their mother as a revenue management consultant, and you can find them all over. But when I started, there really wasn't anybody. And
Mm-hmm.
I had looked and talked and made friends with a lot of people down in the panhandle. And the idea of changing a price after they had settled was almost taboo.
Mind-boggling.
And I had come to this conclusion that we were going to look at things based on time. We were going to look at things based on lead time. We were looking at, and back then we were taking, raw booking summary reports, formatting on looking at lead times. And really how it started was I also wanted to move back to the States to be closer to my family. Grandparents were getting older, brother and sister were getting older, and I was missing a lot of family moments that was really starting to kind of weigh on my heart.
Mm.
And so I was like, you know what? We've got a condo down in Destin. I'm just going to move there and I'm just going to go old school and start hitting the streets. And I just hit the streets and started walking in. And that's another great thing about our business is I would just walk in and start talking to the gatekeeper and just pray that somebody with influence would hear me. And when I would start talking about, hey, look, I've run 200 and something units down in Mexico. We were driving X number of year over year revenue based not only on just going, hey, we were charging 300 a night. Now we're going to charge 310 or 315 a night this year. We were actually getting more and more occupancy by lowering prices as we came in. And back then, that was also not happening. You would have some marketing emails go out to past guests, maybe that were offering 15% off if you filled up calendars in July. And so Reven Research was born out of that with a lot of success to start with.
Door-to-door salesman.
Door-to-door salesman, man. I cut my teeth. A lot of people laugh at me, but my first job out of college was selling yellow pages. And I was a B2B salesperson. I started off on the phone. And part of that job was 2 days a week of just straight cold calling leads that they would give you. And then I got promoted to outside sales where a day of your week there was just dropping by on new customers and people that had left the business. And I didn't know another way to do it, and this is before there was a lot of outbound email sequences and capturing emails via your content that you're creating. And so I didn't know what else to do. So I just went out and hit the streets. We had signed up about 3 or 4 down in the Panhandle that were clients that we were onboarding. And then I remember I had gone up to, my dad lives in Morristown, Tennessee, right outside of Gatlinburg. And so I went up there to see him for a couple of weeks and hit the streets every day then. And all of a sudden we had about 10 clients. And then all of a sudden COVID hits.
Wow.
And so not knowing what was going to happen, not knowing that all of a sudden I thought I was the one out of business. It hadn't even formulated to me that an entire industry right now for a month or so, month and a half, was shut down in other states for months and months and months. And so what happened there was really interesting. I'll never forget when Florida opened up.
Crazy.
We couldn't charge high enough.
Wow.
It was dynamic pricing, I would say, was still a very new concept. It was still beyond pricing, was still working out their kinks. They had quite a few snafus down in the Panhandle. And what we learned how to do really quickly was to create pricing rules inside of PMSs that were matching what we wanted to do.
Right.
And
I would just imagine in that situation, you guys also had an issue of there's like this process of price discovery where you have to figure out what your ceiling is. In an environment where there's so much pent up demand, it must be very difficult to figure out what that ceiling is.
Oh, we were having to look at reservations as they came in.
So it's like, okay, they're coming in too fast based on historicals. It's coming in way too fast. We need to bump this up 15%, 20%.
That was it. Yeah. And so that's how it started is, okay, we're going to go with a blanket increase of pricing here. And so then what we would do is look at what was booking, where were those units, where were they when they were booking, what bedroom counts were booking, time was out the window at that point. And then honestly, what we would do is start off more aggressive because compression was starting to come down. And so all of a sudden it was like, all right, let's raise the price until it stops booking and let it sit there for 6 hours. And then you felt like 6 or 8 hours was an eternity.
I'm sure those days, like in a way, in conversations with other PMCs, they do say this as well, that like those days spoiled them in a way and changed their perspective on pricing. And
it's been one of the hardest obstacles we've overcome at Rev and Research, because imagine this. Imagine like after COVID, that's when dynamic pricing really starts taking its hold. I would say Amy Hinote's conference, DARM in Charleston in 2021 was a mass inflection point for dynamic pricing. 300 serious property managers getting together, really diving into each pricing tool to decide which one was best for them. But imagine too, all of a sudden, it's not just us dealing with these property managers that are seeing 15, 20, 30, 40% growth. And they saw it for a year and a half. And then all of a sudden trying to project where that was going to land. And it was not a soft landing.
No.
It was a very hard landing. And that's when we got at Rev and Research very much into homeowner education.
You have to set expectations for people. Otherwise, they're going to be disappointed.
They're going to be disappointed. And that's where really, I would say in 2020 during COVID was when I hired our first virtual assistant.
Interesting.
It was because...
Why did that happen? Why did you hire a VA?
I needed a VA to handle emails. That was what it was at first. And the first couple I hired were disasters, and it was all my fault. What I have learned from that process was that hiring, firing, and retraining was costing me so much time that I was losing money.
And patience.
And patience. And so what I decided, and it was Mylene, Mylene, she's been with me for a long, long time. I found her, and what I did was I did a search, and what I needed was somebody that could handle emails and somebody that could interpret, somebody that could filter and format Excel documents for me. I didn't need her to analyze it. I didn't need her to go in and look and try to make decisions. I just needed her to serve that up to me on a platter to where now all of a sudden When you start talking about it would take me 15, 20, 30 minutes to format and clean an Excel document, and you've got 10 or 12 clients and you're doing this 2 or 3 times a week, all of a sudden that becomes a day of work.
Yeah.
And so I sat down with her for 2 weeks and we just worked on Zoom together, and she sat with me for 8 to 10 hours a day.
That's the best way for someone to learn. That's the whole concept of having a mentor, mentee, apprenticeship. It's having them there, seeing, living, and breathing what you do on a daily basis.
And that's it. She could see the stress. She could see how much I cared about it. She could start to pick up what I was looking at, why I formatted things this way. And through that, we started developing SOPs. And so now all of a sudden, we've got SOPs of what I'm doing. And she would ask questions of, oh, why did you do this? Why did you lower this pricing and raise that pricing? And so then that took on a life of its own, to where now all of a sudden, hey, Mylene, I need you to format a spreadsheet. I want you to sort it this way. And what I want you to do is to take this part of the portfolio that doesn't meet these criteria and do this. And now all of a sudden, Mylene's an analyst. And in revenue management, it's not like it's rocket science. It's more about how do you actually come to the data to look at it.
It's if-then statements. If you do this, then the foundational thing to do is this, and if you understand those if-then statements, then you're set up for success.
And that's exactly what we created. We're just pages and pages of if-then statements. And so now all of a sudden, I'm able to focus on client-facing retention, client-facing acquisition. I'm able to look at what we're doing really working.
And that's a great point. I think a lot of people, when they are trying to delegate, they don't realize that the gap in their growth, in their company's growth, is often taking all of those time-consuming tasks and responsibilities and then shifting them to someone else, so then you can focus on the thing that is very much high leverage. And in this case for you, it was developing and maintaining the relationships with the people that are putting money in your pocket.
And that's it. And the coolest thing about the way that we did things was Mylene understood the elementary concepts of revenue management, and she understood how to find those concepts. She understood how to get there. Mm. And when you understand how to get there, the majority of the revenue management job is done. So then when I found Rebecca and hired Rebecca, one of the first things we did was get her a virtual assistant.
Yeah.
Because, and I say this all the time, we're not going to be doing the mindless work. That's not for us to do. I'm not hiring a CEO or a new person that's going to come in and help me scale the business and then have them bogged down in that $10 an hour work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you can get that off, your employees' plates, you can get that off your team's plates, all of a sudden the culture and the morale of the business changes. Because I could pull up my Slack channel right now, and for Rebecca to be able to fire off, or Emily to be able to fire off simple tasks,
makes life so much easier.
And then with Mylene and our virtual assistants, it was time to make them master users of Wheelhouse, master users of these pricing tools.
Yeah.
And Mylene can fly into Wheelhouse and operate in there quicker than I can now.
Yeah.
She's in there more than I am. And now all of a sudden, you have a client meeting and they want to take, like we just had one for a great client we've got in Oxford, Mississippi. They've got 7 home football games. We've got some competition that's come in year over year. So all of a sudden, we're not getting the same rates that we could get year over year. So now all of a sudden, for 7 units times 120 properties, you're looking at a lot of work there to go in and lower minimum prices and to put custom rates on. It's a lot easier to be able to go, hey, for these home football weekends, for these groups of homes, this is what we want to do. And it's all in an Excel spreadsheet for Mylene. She runs through there, runs it through her team. And all of a sudden, Emily's afternoons opened up to do true revenue management analyst work at the account by account, homeowner by homeowner level.
The big picture stuff is handled by her, and then the nitty gritty gets handled by the support team, which, by the way, would cost you significantly more if you brought that stateside. And, that's another huge benefit to it. And it's mutually beneficial too, because these folks, that many of whom, they're from the Philippines, Mylene's from the Philippines, my team is from the Philippines, they're getting paid a really good competitive
Yeah.
salary.
No, they really are. And I love that. Mylene's been with me for so long. I care about her a lot, and we're able to pay her an above average salary that then allows us to keep our prices at a reasonable rate. Because one thing that I've always said is we won't work with somebody that our price point cuts down on their profitability.
There has to be a return on investment on it. It doesn't make sense. The whole point of bringing in a revenue manager is to actually optimize revenue. And if it becomes a revenue loss for you, there's no reason whatsoever for you to sign on with a
To sign on the
Reven
client.
research. Yeah, 100%.
And
No,
that's why, we've never charged a percentage of any revenue, because I don't believe that you can run. I think when you're operating a business on percentages and on commission, to have to pay somebody else out of commission all of a sudden,
that money that adds up.
you're giving away percentage, you're giving away points of your business before you even realize it.
Yeah, you've scaled up Reven research now, and you've been in the industry for such a long time. You've made so many connections. Fairly recently, you guys founded Happy Guest. Tell me about how that came about, and tell me how it's different now running Happy Guest than it was running Reven research.
Yeah, so definitely different. One being a consulting company and one being a software company, one being a
Yeah.
SaaS model. The way that I got into Happy Guest was my buddy, good friend of mine, Mike O'Connell. He calls me. I'm down in Hawaii on vacation, kind of just working and kind of just getting out of the cold in Alabama. And I had just had a nightmare of a check-in process. I got in at like 11 at night. The check-in instructions were like 13 paragraphs. There was a lot of misspellings. It wasn't clean. It was through an Airbnb booking. So I'm having to dive through messages, and not only that, I had looked at like 10 or 12 places. So I'm trying to actually remember which one did I book? What is it? And it turned out that like the door code didn't work. And then if the door code didn't work, you could go to this rent cafe, and the rent cafe was 10 blocks away. And all of a sudden, I'm just like, this is an absolute nightmare. And I had not really had that ever happen to me at that catastrophic of a level. And Mike and Kanan get me on a call the next day. And they show me Happy Guest, and they show me this check-in flow of where I could have actually looked at the house rules. I could have known what to expect. I could have been prepared, because with Happy Guest, not only are we handling your guest communication and your guest check-in flow, going through your house rules, your rental contract, ID verifications, a vehicle to sell damage waivers, but we're also powering that by arrival instructions and guidebooks, and it's all centralized to the guest. So all of a sudden I'm like, literally, if I would have had this last night, I would have been in bed at 11:15 instead of 1.
Yeah. The check-in process is something that I've seen historically a lot of property because at Delegate, we handle all types of different property managers, from the guy that has one property to the guy that has 300. And one thing I've seen in analyzing their check-in flows is information for even like some established property managers can be really convoluted and very confusing. And then they get frustrated, like hosts and PMs will get frustrated with their guests, saying like, they're asking so many questions. But the reality is that they shouldn't have to ask that many questions. There should be a really streamlined way of going through a check-in flow. And I think people don't realize that contributes a lot to that 5-star review. If you're able to get them through the door and you're able to assist them through the whole check-in process in a seamless manner, people generally have a good experience going forward, because they know where everything is in the house. They know how to operate everything. And in this day and age, having a product like Happy Guest, it's such a game changer, because it can let you focus on providing that higher level of hospitality, and then everything else is handled within the app.
That 100%. And like I had been out of property management for almost 3 to 4 years at that point, and I had kind of forgotten what a nightmare check-in flows could be. We had a pretty good check-in process just because all the houses on the island were named.
Yeah.
And so, when you're talking about 7 square miles and you're talking about a taxi union down there where people have been driving taxis since they were 16, oh, we're going to stay at Casa Perlita. It's like, oh, yeah,
We know. Yeah.
we take you right there. And back then it was just keys under the mat or the front door was open with a check-in person waiting on you.
Yeah.
It was a different version. I didn't realize that this was such a large issue and such a large time constraint on property managers. And all of a sudden now, Blendi, it goes back to what you were saying. You can leverage that high level, high leveraging, high impact issues in your business. So all of a sudden you're not answering guest questions about where the lockbox is, how the coffee maker works, how the hot water heater works, how to heat the hot tub, etc. What you can start leveraging is mid-stay cleans, is stocking fridges, is roses waiting on you when you get there.
We made that comment in there was a previous online event we did, and one company that uses Happy Guest, which I think is like an extremely great example of taking that leverage that you get with Happy Guest and then replacing it with something that offers another high leverage activity, upselling and sales. When you don't have to work as much with the check-in process and you have that automated, now you can set aside your resources, potentially your overseas VAs, to focus on one thing, and that's driving more revenue for each reservation. Getting on the phone with the guest and saying, hey, I know that you're coming with your husband or wife. Would you like to purchase our couples package? Having
That
those phone calls at scale is another revenue driver.
and it becomes a massive revenue driver. And we've got clients that's entire business model, or they have an entire new business model based on top of Happy Guest, of driving these upsells, of driving this after the booking revenue. Because once again, it comes down to the crazy world of our accounting, of where you're sharing that rent. So to capture the guest, you are paying an 80 to 85% fee to capture that guest, meaning that you're not keeping 80% of the revenue. You're only keeping 15, 20, 25%. That's just your commission. Now that you've captured the guest, where can you make monetization efforts there?
Yeah.
The Happy Guest giving a vehicle and giving a quick and easy service to be able to purchase inside the app, be able to free up time on the property management side to be able to create these SOPs and processes. All of a sudden now, hey, ADRs are going down 5 to 7% a year, but our upsell revenues, our upsell revenue is 3% of our gross. All of a sudden, you've overcome that by leaps and bounds because you're not sharing that upsell revenue.
Definitely. Another thing I'll note is what I love about Happy Guest. I said this to Mike in a previous podcast. It is a software. A lot of times in this industry, there's software that's built for large PMCs. There's software that's built for the small guy with 1 or 2 listings. From what I've seen, you guys have everything from the mom and pop that has that vacation rental home in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, to the big property manager down in South Florida. It's like, and it's applicable to everyone, and everyone wants to make that additional revenue, and everybody wants to provide an exceptional guest experience, and Happy Guest does that.
Thank you for that compliment. That's what the surprising thing to me has been. And that's what's so cool about working with a team that has rented rooms for a living, that's been in this space, that's been through these issues and problems, that we can come together and create a product that can go from top to bottom in the industry. And that actually, the more properties that you have, the more opportunity that you have to drive that with, just like you said, the economy of scale. And we're not done building there. We'll always be continuing to optimize the product. But I think that when you start thinking about the fact that the guest going from their booking confirmation to when they open that front door is handled in a professional way, and every guest that you have is going through the same process, all of a sudden when the process breaks, it's a lot easier to fix. But all of a sudden as well, you're taking care of one of the biggest pain points or nerve-wracking parts of a short-term rental stay.
Yeah. I
getting in the
100%
community.
agree. Also, one thing, having worked with different companies in the space, one thing I appreciate about my experience working with Happy Guest thus far, and I've heard it with other clients that use Happy Guest, the personal touch
Yeah.
that goes into it. I think when you have a software company where the founders you can reach, you can give them feedback, and they're really invested in your success, there's nothing better. And it's hard to come by in a software company because as you grow, obviously it becomes more and more difficult to fulfill. But you're a real value, I think, that's driven in each and every one of you is the value of investing in the personal relationships you have with your clients,
Right.
whether it's me or, the guy that has 300 units down in Florida. It's no difference in personal attention to detail.
No, no, not at all. That's what we're here for. We have a passion for this. We have drive for this that wants us to continually create an experience for the guest journey that professionalizes that person with one listing who doesn't even have a direct booking site to the person who's doing 70% of their bookings direct. We want to drive the professionalization home.
Beautiful.
And think about what Happy Guest does for repeat booking. Why would you want to book 1 year with somebody who has Happy Guests and that are using that 5-star check-in flow to somebody that you don't know what those check-in instructions are going to be? Because there's nothing worse than having to go through all that on your way down, trying to figure out this. Oh, we've got to go get the keys from here. Oh, we've got to do this. Oh, where are the light switches? How do you use the coffee maker? What are we doing here? How do we turn the TVs on? How do we do that? Everything that you get questions about can be embedded into Happy Guest for that guest satisfaction and that guest 5-star experience.
I love it. Ben, I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast. Where can people find you, connect with you personally for Rev Research as well as for Happy Guest?
Definitely been at REV and research.com, or you can hook me up on LinkedIn, Benjamin Coleman. Either one of those are going to be your best bets.
I'm looking forward to seeing the continued growth of Happy Guest. It's been a real success story, and I'm really glad to be a part of it as a client and a partner of yours.
Yeah, Blendi, we couldn't do it without you and your team, man. We really appreciate you.
Awesome. Ben, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks,
Everyone,
man.
thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the Sip and Scale podcast. Bye for now.